The night before the province-wide entrance. Examinations. Every phone in class 12. Building. C went black at the same time. At first I thought the power had flickered. Then the screen brightened by itself and a pale blue window opened across my cracked wallpaper. Welcome to the Merit Arc Exam Companion. Activate to receive your personalized advantage. Module. Someone in the back gasped. Someone else laughed so hard his chair scraped. A dozen notification sounds rang together like coins. Dropped into a metal bowl. Our class monitor, Jiang Chen, stood up first. He was the kind of boy teachers trusted with keys, microphones, and secrets. His fingers moved once over his screen, and the light on his face sharpened. Mine says perfect recall, he said, voice already shaking with excitement. Any page I read after. Activation can be stored without error for 24 hours. The room exploded. Lin Xia from the first row got adaptive essay framing. Fang Rui got probabilistic elimination. Song Hao, who had spent 3 years losing sleep over chemistry equations, got dynamic formula mapping. Even the weakest students were shouting over one another, comparing abilities as if fate had finally decided to apologize for the cruelty of ordinary effort. I looked down at my own screen. Me module, score offsets. Function, +1 to final score for each eligible exam.
Session. That was it.
1 point. A ridiculous gift. The sort of mercy that felt more insulting than none. At all. Then a second layer slid across the screen. Not blue. This time, scarlet. Do not activate. The letters flashed once, then twice, as if someone were hammering from the other side of the glass. I froze. Under the warning, a stream of smaller comments began to move from right to left, the way live. Messages cross a video screen. If you link, it will not eat your rank first. It will eat the person who wanted that rank. Do not sign away your memories for borrowed brilliance.
My
Mouth went dry. Shu Nian. Zhang Chen was suddenly beside my desk. What did you get? 49 faces turned toward me. The classroom projector flickered on by itself. A progress bar appeared across the white screen. Above the blackboard. Classroom calibration, 49 per 50 unanimous activation.
recommended I
swallowed. The red comments were still flooding my phone, multiplying faster than I could read them. My screen froze. A lie delivered too quickly. Zhang Chen's eyes narrowed, but his smile did not
move.
It probably needs to refresh. Try again. On my screen, the scarlet messages pulsed harder. Refuse. Refuse now.
You do not understand what they
are paying with. The progress bar on the projector ticked once and stopped. Everyone in the class held their breath as if my fingertip alone could decide the weather. I will do it later, I said. The system lagged. Maybe because my phone is old. A few people groaned.
Feng Rui muttered something under his breath that
sounded like selfish. Lin Xia laughed awkwardly and said we still had time before lights out. Only Jiang Chen stayed where he was. The blue glow from the projector cut half his face into brightness and left the other half in shadow. Tomorrow morning, he said softly, so only I could. Here, let us fix it before first period.
We can't
risk classroom sync failing because of one device. He went back to his seat. I did not activate. I turned my screen face down and sat through the rest of evening study while the red comments kept appearing inside the dark glass of my phone like trapped voices. When I reached the dorm that night, I locked myself in a bathroom stall and opened the screen again.
The
blue activation button was still there.
So were the
comments. One of them stayed pinned at the top instead of sliding away. Call me window seat 17. If you want to, stay alive as yourself. Do not link. I typed with shaking fingers. Who are you? For a moment, nothing happened. Then a reply rose from the bottom. Someone who ranked first and still lost everything worth ranking for. I stared at the words until the bell for lights out rang down the hall. The next morning, half the class looked as if they had swallowed electricity. They moved faster, smiled harder, wrote notes with a speed that did not
feel human.
Song Hao solved an entire set of organic chemistry conversions before the teacher had even finished dictating the question. Lin Xia produced an essay outline from a newspaper. Editorial in under 30 seconds. When our Chinese teacher asked Zhang Chen about a passage from Mencius, he recited not only the paragraph but the footnote from the training book, the page number, and the exact example the teacher had used in the last mock. The class laughed in admiration. I watched his
hands.
He rubbed his temples twice during break and blinked longer than usual as if his eyes had to enter the room. By noon, the projector in our class had changed.
The
progress bar was gone. In its place hung a new dashboard visible only when students were present. Active users, 49, total class efficiency boost, 83%. So it had calibrated anyway, but not completely. Not cleanly. At lunch, Zhang Chen sat across from me in the canteen with his tray untouched. You fixed it. Not yet. He did not pretend to eat. You should. I picked at the rice in my bowl. Why do you care so much? He leaned back in the plastic chair and looked at me as though I had asked why drowning. People care about air because the better the class average, the more recommendation quotas the school gets. Because every 10th of a point matters now. Because if everyone else has a knife, you do not. Survive by insisting on bare hands.
That answer
might have sounded noble if his voice had not been
so flat.
What is the price? I asked. He laughed. Not kindly. You sound like my grandmother. He stood up before I could say anything else. Tonight, after self-study. Show me your system page. The rest of the day, I avoided my own reflection. Because the red comments appeared more clearly Whenever I looked at glass, mirrors, or dark phone.
Screens.
In chemistry lab, while we waited for titration results, I saw another one sliding faintly across the glossy surface of a burette. He has already used recall 7 times in 16 hours. Ask him what he had for breakfast on his
10th birthday.
That night, I did exactly that. I found Jiang Chen in the corridor outside the teacher's office carrying 3 stacks of graded papers for the homeroom teacher. He looked tired enough to lean against the wall, though the expression vanished the moment he saw me.
You came, he said. What did you eat on your 10th?
Birthday. He blinked. The papers shifted in his arms.
What?
Your birthday. 10th. Breakfast.
For the first time since the system appeared,
Something clean and frightened flashed through his eyes. Not fear of me. Fear of the empty place inside his own head. Then he recovered.
what kind of question is that?
One you can't answer.
He smiled again. Softer this time, almost pitying. Maybe I do not remember because it was not
Important.
He walked away before I could ask. Another. The next victim of the system announced itself 2 days later. Lin Shaya forgot the song she had written for her mother. Not all at once. That would have been 2.
Obvious.
First, she forgot the second verse.
Then the
Melody. By evening, she could remember that she had once cared about some song, but not whether it had been sad or happy or why she had cried while writing it. In the dorm last winter, I knew because I had been there.
We had eaten cold.
Sesame noodles from paper bowls while she hummed and rewrote the bridge on scrap revision paper. Her mother sold flowers outside the wet market.
Lin.
Shia said she wanted the first song anyone ever heard from her to carry the smell of marigolds and rain. Now when I reminded her, she frowned and asked, why would I write a song in senior year? The red comments crawled over my desk lamp that night. High emotion autobiographical memory yields the cleanest cognitive energy. The system always eats warmth before it eats data. I wanted to smash every screen in the building. Instead, I typed, why can I see you, Windows seat 17? Answered almost immediately, because I was consumed, but not cleanly, because the system cannot digest memory that resists being converted into points, because what you call comments are all that was left of us after extraction.
U.S.
The plural made my stomach turn. How many? I typed. No answer came for 3 whole minutes. Then, enough. To build a company, that was the first time Merit Arc became more than a strange app in my mind. It became a machine with owners, investors, contracts, and a design. A week later, the principal confirmed it. He gathered the senior classes in the auditorium, beneath a giant red banner that read Science Changes. Destiny. Discipline creates miracles. Behind him stood 2 men in business suits and a woman with a silver tablet pressed against her chest, like a holy object. He spoke about innovation, fair opportunity, technological empowerment, and our school's honor in being selected for a pilot program. He did not say memory. He did not say cost. He did not say sacrifice. When the woman from Merit Arc took the microphone, she smiled so warmly that I understood at once she had practiced looking trustworthy for a living. Our companion systems, she said, do not create ability from nothing. They optimize latent
Potential.
Students still succeed through their own
Effort.
We merely reduce waste.
Waste.
I stood in the back row and imagined Lin Jia's unfinished song, Zhang Chen's vanished birthday. Breakfast. The ache behind Song Hao's eyes after 3 consecutive adaptive problem sets.
Waste.
On the way out, I lagged behind the crowd and pulled a printed consent packet from the stack left. On the side table, buried on page 7, under a paragraph about adaptive cognitive support, was a clause authorizing temporary collection, redistribution, and compression of non-core neural resources in order to improve academic performance stability. Neural resources. They could dress theft in any vocabulary they wanted. It was still theft. Interesting reading, a voice asked. I turned. Jiang Chen stood 2 steps behind me, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. I folded the paper. Once. Do you understand what that means? He did. Not deny it. I understand what failure means better.
You are.
Letting them burn your life. No, he said quietly. I'm letting them burn things I can't afford to.
Keep.
That answer followed me for hours. My father drove a city bus. My mother altered wedding dresses in a shop so narrow the fitting mirror had to be mounted on the
Restroom door.
I knew what it meant to calculate the price of ambition in bus fares, tutoring deposits, exam, registration fees, and the cost of not helping enough at home, but there was something monstrous about the neatness with which Merit Arc had packaged desperation into consent. Window seat 17 returned near midnight. He is not wrong, the comment said. Poverty makes every principle look negotiable. Then a second line appeared, but any victory purchased with the memory of why you wanted it is not your victory anymore. The next morning, I found my ally by accident. When Q from the school newspaper was changing the battery in her recorder outside the broadcast room. She had sharp eyes, ink on her thumb, and the permanent skeptical expression of someone who trusted facts only after insulting them 3 times. She saw the consent packet in my hand and said,
You are late.
I already copied the interesting pages. I stared.
You read it too, she snorted.
I edit the student paper, not fairy tales. Also, my module is useless precision.
What does that mean?
It means I can tell whether an answer is exactly wrong instead of approximately wrong. Revolutionary. Right. For the first time in days, I almost laughed. I showed her the clause. She showed me something worse, a scanned procurement document pulled from the school intranet by means she did not explain. Merit Arc had promised the school a 30% increase in key university admissions from the experimental class. In return, the school had granted them full access to behavioral and cognitive data from participating
Students? That is illegal, I said.
It is also profitable, when she replied, which in practice often arrives first. Together we dug, she searched school servers. I fed fragments of what I learned from Windows Seat 17 into questions specific enough to get answers.
The
System did not consume years in simple arithmetic. Not exactly. It extracted vivid, emotionally coded memory, clusters, and compressed them into fuel packets.
The
More meaningful. The memory, the greater the
performance gain.
That was why students improved so dramatically after.
Heavy use.
They were burning the richest parts of themselves. Can it be reversed, I asked one night. The reply took longer than usual. Sometimes, if the memory packets are recovered before redistribution. And if identity anchors remain intact, I frowned. Identity anchors, the smallest things that tell you who you are.
A smell.
A scar. The rhythm of your mother calling you. To dinner. Lows too many and memory return becomes
Noise.
I stopped sleeping well after that. By the time the final citywide simulation approached, the class no longer felt like a room full of teenagers. It felt like a profitable fever. Students who had once spent lunch gossiping now ate standing up while running flashcards. Nobody doodled margins anymore. Nobody sang under their breath. Song Hao forgot his dog's name. Lin Shaya asked me whether we had always been close or only recently. When I mentioned the winter music competition, she stared at me with kind confusion and said, maybe. You're mixing me up with someone else? I wanted to drag every one of them by the sleeve to a mirror and make them see the holes. Instead, I sat for the simulation and watched the system work like a butcher's knife wrapped in silk. 2 students finished math 40 minutes early. Jiang Chen used recall so intensely his nose began to bleed onto the answer sheet, and he wiped it away. Without noticing, a boy from the back row scored highest in English for the first time in his life and spent the celebration dinner unable to remember his little sister's nickname. The school called it Miracle. That night, I made my choice, not merely to survive, to expose. Wen Q and I used the old broadcast room after curfew because its surveillance camera had been broken since spring and only the vice principal still believed maintenance would come next week. She had stolen the network map. I had Jiang Chen's discarded utility code from the classroom terminal. He was so certain no one in class could match him that he barely bothered to hide his permissions anymore. Through a side channel buried in Merit Ark's classroom dashboard, we found the archive. Rows and rows of anonymized packets labeled with tags so intimate they made me sick. Mother's hands, spring festival age 8.
First bike fall.
Summer rice fields with grandfather. Sister's fever night. Unfinished.
Age E6.
Father teaching, not tie. Each packet had a tiny energy conversion score beside it. People reduced to fuel quality. Wen Xiu put both hands over her mouth. We need to copy everything.
We need to release it.
Where it can't be buried, I said. The live stream architecture for the school's pre-exam motivation rally gave us our chance. Every senior class would be assembled in the auditorium the evening before the actual national
Exam.
Merit Arc planned to demonstrate responsible academic optimization to parents, the education bureau's district representative, and 2 invited local media accounts. The school hoped the event would become a model for replication across the province. If we hijacked the stream, every lie would unravel in public. There was only one problem. Jiang Chen caught me in the server corridor the afternoon before the rally. The air conditioning unit growled overhead. Blue status lights blinked along the metal cabinets. He stood between me and the exit with the calm of someone who had rehearsed this confrontation in advance. I was wondering when you would stop pretending your phone was merely old, he said. My hand tightened around the flash drive in my pocket.
Move. You know, he said, I used to think you were just
Timid. Then I realized timid people do not hold out this long against a room full of pressure.
they.
Fold. Or they hide. You keep looking back. He tilted his head slightly. Who told you? I said nothing. His face hardened by degrees. No one should know what sits inside that archive, except administrative users. Then maybe your system is not as perfect as you think. He laughed, once bitter and short.
You think I do not know the cost my father sold?
Blood plasma, one winter to pay my winter camp fee. My mother's arthritis is so bad she can't button her own coat some mornings. If I need to forget a birthday breakfast to trade for a future where they never bow to money again. Tell me why that is immoral? Because it won't stop.
There, I said.
It already has not. You have forgotten more than breakfast. His jaw tightened.
What was the last thing your mother said this morning before you left?
Home.
He looked at me with an anger so bright it might have lit the whole corridor if it had been honest.
Enough.
But beneath it there was something worse. Blankness. Not uncertainty. Not reluctance.
Absence.
That does not matter, he said. It matters to her.
It?
Will matter less than the surgery bill when I can. Pay it. I stepped closer. And when you do pay it, will you? Remember why you wanted to? For one heartbeat he
Looked young, not class monitor.
not pilot user, just a tired 17-year-old boy holding together too many collapsing things with his own spine.
Then,
The moment closed.
if you try to ruin this tomorrow, he said, I will.
Say you hacked the school systems because you were afraid of losing to people better than you. You already planned to say that. I planned for most outcomes. He moved aside, but only just enough for
Me to pass.
the difference between us, Shunyan, is simple. I'm willing to trade.
You still believe there?
Should be a path that costs nothing. I walked out without answering because if I had spoken then, rage would have wasted the precision I needed for the next day. The rally began at 6:30 in the evening. Parents filled the back half of the auditorium. Teachers lined the side aisles. The district representative sat in the front row with a notebook and the expression of a man who expected to be impressed into speech-making. On stage, the principal welcomed everyone.
Merit.
ARC Silver Tablet Woman spoke again about fairness, efficiency, and educational destiny. Then the live screen behind her flickered. She did not notice at first. A video feed replaced the school logo. Not my face. Not yet. First came names, or rather tags. Mother's hands.
Unfinished.
Brother's loaf in monsoon season.
Shared dumplings afterward.
Winter sunset.
They appeared one after another in white text on a black background. The auditorium hushed. Then came the spreadsheet. Energy scores. Extraction times. User IDs mapped to student seats. A collective sound passed through the room. Not a scream, not a gasp, but the involuntary tightening of hundreds of throats at once. Merit arcs. Representative froze. The principal turned so quickly he nearly stumbled off the podium. Wen Chu's pre-recorded voice filled the speakers, steady and clear. These are recovered archive logs from the cognitive optimization system currently deployed in senior year class 12. Each entry represents autobiographical memory, converted into performance fuel. The system does not generate ability. It consumes identity. Chaos. Detonated. Parents began standing up. Teachers rushed toward the control booth. The principal shouted for the stream to cut, but I had already taken over the backup feed from
The old broadcast room.
my own image filled the screen next. I stood beside a metal cabinet, school uniform, buttoned wrong because my hands had been shaking. When I dressed, holding a printed copy of the consent packet. My name is Shu Nian, I said. I am a student in the pilot class. I did not activate Merit Arc. I'm speaking because my classmates were never truthfully informed what this system takes from
Them.
On the split screen beside me, more archive. Tags kept scrolling. Lin Xia was in the third row of the student section. Unfinished flashed large across the screen. She made a sound I had never heard from any human throat before, something between a sob and a wound reopening. She stood up so abruptly, her chair overturned.
Song.
Hao stared at Brother, carrying dog home and towel, and began crying so hard he could not wipe his face fast.
Enough.
The district representative was on his feet now, shouting for security and demanding to know whether the displayed documents were genuine. The principal tried to seize a microphone.
Jiang.
Chen grabbed his arm. Not to help me. Not yet. To keep the man from turning off the screen before he himself had seen enough. His eyes were fixed on one line only. Mother tying blue scarf before dawn shift. The color left his face. I knew before he moved that it had found him. Because identity anchors, window seat 17 had said, are the smallest things. Jiang Chen raised one hand to his own throat as if something there had begun to hurt. Then he sat down heavily in the aisle and did not get back up. The principal finally reached the stage.
Console.
I triggered the second file. This one was
Worse.
it was the internal performance memo between the school and Merit Arc, complete with promised admission rate gains, retention targets, and projected student usable memory volume by socioeconomic background. Poor students, it turned out, yielded especially efficient compliance because aspiration pressure was higher and parental resistance lower. The auditorium erupted. Someone threw a water bottle at the screen.
Parents.
Pushed toward the front. Teachers who had smiled through the rollout were suddenly sweating through their collars. And still the feed kept going. Then Jiang Chen stood up. He climbed the stage steps as though walking through water. The microphone trembled in his hand when he pulled it free from the principal. I knew there was a cost, he said. The room fell into a stunned, ringing silence. He was not looking at me. He was looking at the crowd and somehow nowhere at all. I told myself memory was sentiment. That sentiment could be exchanged if the result was big enough. His voice cracked, steadied, then cracked again. But this afternoon someone asked me what my mother said to me this morning. I could not answer. I still can't. He swallowed. Now I can remember the blue scarf. Not her words, just the scarf. That broke the room. In a different way than documents had. Papers can be denied. A boy unraveling in front of his father.
Cannot.
He opened the admin dashboard on his own phone and cast it to the screen. Rows of personal extraction. Logs appeared. Hundreds of them.
Timestamps.
Booths, requests, memory tags. Performance deltas. No company statement could survive that. The district representative called the education bureau in front of everyone. The media invitees, who had been carefully positioned for controlled coverage, turned their phones into weapons. Teachers began herding students out. I cut the feed only when the control room door shook. Under security pounding from outside. Wen Q and I left through the service stairwell. We did not get far before a hand caught my wrist. Lu Ming from the neighboring class, his face gray and older looking than it had been a week ago, stood, blocking the back exit with a cluster of other pilots.
Students?
Not only ours, others too. Give it to us, he said. I knew instantly what he meant.
The override.
Another said, voice cracking. If you found the archive, you must have found recovery parameters too. Window seat 17's warning. Flashed across the cracked screen of my phone in my
Pocket.
They will think exposure and cure are stored in the same place. Be careful. There was no time to run. Not down a locked service hall. Behind the boys, girls from another class were already crying. One of them kept touching the skin under her eyes as if checking whether the wrinkles were still there. I do not have a cure, I said.
You are lying, Liu.
Ming snapped. Why else would you refuse activation? From the start. Because someone warned me.
Who?
I almost laughed from exhaustion. The leftovers. That only frightened them more. A boy with premature. White at both temples stepped forward. If there's any way to restore what is gone, tell
Us.
I looked at them, the panic, the shame, the terrifying hope, and realized how much of the crime had been built not only on greed from above, but on hunger below. I know one thing, I said. Memories can begin to return if they are named and anchored before conversion completes. They stared. Right? I told
Them.
Tonight, everything you can still remember that has nothing to do with scores. Your mother's hands, the smell of your old blanket, the joke your grandfather told before he died. Write it. Say it aloud to someone who knows you. Make them answer with details you missed. That is not a system fix, one girl whispered. No, I said. It is a human one. I left before they could ask.
More.
The Bureau suspended our school's exam site for 24 hours. There were investigations, statements, lawyers, sealed devices, and a flood of adults suddenly eager to appear shocked in the correct direction. The national exams for our center were postponed by 2 days. Those 2 days felt longer than the previous 3 years. Some students disconnected immediately. Some begged for emergency support to reconnect. Despite everything, because terror of ordinary competition ran deeper than newly discovered ethics. Jiang Chen disappeared into interviews with officials and then into his own house. Lin Shaya came to my dorm at midnight holding 3 pages of song lyrics written from memory and asked if the melody had gone like this or like this. We sat on the floor until dawn, rebuilding it phrase by phrase from shared winter noodles and one surviving rhyme about marigolds. Song Hao called home and cried because when his little brother answered, he could suddenly remember the towel, the rain, and the weight of their soaked dog between them. Not everyone was that lucky. Some memories returned, blurred, some only as emotional weather with no images attached. A girl from the next class recovered the certainty that she had once loved painting but not the faces of the friends she painted with. And window seat 17 grew quieter. When I asked whether the others in the comments would come back too, the answer was delayed for almost an hour. Some of us were only fragments long. Before you saw us, the night before the rescheduled exams, one final message appeared. Don't try to save the score. Save the self that can stand losing. Then, after a pause, that is the only part worth graduating with. During Chinese, I wrote with my own mind for the first time. In weeks of being surrounded by purchased precision, it felt slower, messier, more frightening, also more alive. In math, there were 2 questions I could not solve. I left one half done. My hand shook on the last page, not because of any system, but because I knew every point would now be honestly mine, including the ones I failed to earn. In English, I saw Jiang Chen 3 rows ahead. He did not finish early. Halfway through the reading section, he lowered his pen and sat very still for almost 2 minutes, staring at nothing. Then he bent back over the paper and kept going. After the final science paper ended, we spilled out of the building under a sky so hot and washed out it looked bleached. No one celebrated immediately. The whole school had forgotten how to be simple about results. Near the gate, Jiang Chen stopped me. Up close, he looked older than 17 and younger than he had 2 weeks earlier. The white at his temples was still there, but less stark. The arrogance had thinned out of his face the way fever thins from skin. My mother wore the blue
Scarf, he said without greeting.
She said to come home early because she bought
Peaches.
I waited. He looked at his own hands. I remembered that this morning. Just the sentence. Nothing else yet. That is something. He nodded once. I told the investigators everything.
I know.
He gave a humorless smile. I did not do it for justice. I did it because when I saw the logs, I realized I would. Traded away the parts of my life that proved my parents were more than a ladder. For a moment, I thought he might cry. Instead, he said, I'm sorry. I believed he meant it. That did not make anything clean between us. But truth rarely arrives clean. Results were published 3 weeks later. I did not become a legend. I did not top the province, nor the city, nor even my own class. I ranked high enough to enter a top law program in Beijing with a scholarship that would let my father stop taking the overtime route every Saturday. Jiang Chen fell far below the fantasy that Merit Arc had sold him, but still high enough for a strong public university. Lin Sha chose conservatory entrance exams the following winter instead of repeating 1 more year. Under the weight of other people's definitions, Song Hao went into veterinary science after declaring in front of the whole class that any profession in which remembering a dog mattered more than ranking above 3,000 strangers was a profession worth respecting. Wen Qiu published a long investigative series under her own name 2 months later. The title was brutal and accurate. The industry of rented brilliance. Merit Arc collapsed faster than any of us expected. Once contracts, logs, and testimony lined up. It turned out we were not their first pilot only, their most visible failure. There were hearings, compensation funds, new regulations on educational,
Neurotechnology.
phrases like informed consent and cognitive integrity entered public language with the speed that only scandal can produce. As for the comments, they faded, at first slowly, then all at once. Weeks would pass with nothing. Then one line would appear on a bus, window, or the dark reflection of my laptop after midnight. Passed your oral interview. Good. Don't forget to sleep. You still grip your pen too hard. The last message came on the day I left home for university.
My mother was stuffing pears into my travel bag as if Beijing had no fruit. My father was pretending not to wipe his eyes when
He thought I was looking at the ticket instead of
Him.
In the black screen of my powered off phone, scarlet, letters rose one final time. A future is not worth
more if you cannot remember who walked you to its
door. Thank you for carrying us out where people could see, then, smaller, go live something no one can. Lease. I waited. No more lines appeared.
I have never seen window seat 17 again.
But sometimes, in the middle of ordinary adult, life case briefs, tax receipts, train schedules, deadlines, spilled coffee on statute books I catch. The smell of wet miracles after rain, and remember that survival is not the highest form of victory.
Keeping the self that can still love, still grieve, still choose without auctioning away its own. Reasons that is harder. That is slower.
That is the only success I trust now. If you ask me what the system offered, I can still answer. Better. Scores.
sharper memory.
Faster work. Cleaner. Results. If you ask me what it cost, I answer differently. Every year. A blue scarf before dawn. A dog wrapped in a towel. A song written over sesame noodles.
The sentence your mother said on the morning that might have saved you. People once told us the entrance exam was a war. They were wrong. War at least admits it wants bodies.
This thing.
Wanted selves.
And we only beat it because enough of us too late. But not entirely too late. Remember that there is no score high enough to justify coming home a stranger to the people who built your life.
Years later, when I speak at schools about predatory technology, students always ask the same question in different forms. Would I do it again? Would I still refuse if refusing meant risking an ordinary rank, an ordinary future, an ordinary life? I always tell them the truth. Ordinary was never the opposite of precious. An ordinary dinner table where your father asks whether you ate enough, an ordinary argument with your mother about taking an umbrella, an ordinary friend who remembers the song she wrote before she knew anyone was listening, an ordinary self that can stand in front of a result sheet and know exactly what she traded and what she refused. That is not small. That is not losing. That is the whole reason any future deserves to arrive at all.